Welcome to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. It's the show geared toward keeping you up to speed with the latest auto news, event coverage, and expert industry insight. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Avery and John Kraman.
Hey, and welcome to another On the Move. My name is Matt Avery. I'm executive producer of The Transmission. And joining me is co-host John Kraman, lead TV commentator for Mecum Auctions on NBCSN. John, today's show focuses on the good old-fashioned American V8. Starting with in segment 2, I have a special conversation with Scott Talon, director of Jeep North America, about the quickest, most powerful Wrangler ever that is coming to showrooms this spring, the 2021 Wrangler Rubicon 392.
Yeah, and I think Matt will finish up on segment 3 with a discussion about what's currently available from the folks at Stellantis in regard to V8s using that Hemi platform. And I think our listeners are going to be very surprised to see just how many V8s are available in the 2021 model year.
Yeah, there's probably more than people might realize. But before we get into it, let's talk about this spring. Mecum Auctions has a very busy schedule. What's in store for the months ahead?
Well, Matt, still reeling from the success of the best January in Mecum history, $141 million. That momentum is going to carry us forward into the next 3 months with 6 big auctions on this schedule. Of course, next up is going to be Glendale, Arizona at the State Farm Stadium, March 18th through the 20th. And then just stepping right through March, going right into June, we've got the Gone Farm and Spring Classic, tractor and truck auction, lots of memorabilia there as well. Early April, Houston, Vegas Motorcycles moved, of course, from our January date to a new date, April 28th to May 1st at the Las Vegas Convention Center with the world's largest vintage motorcycle auction. Expect almost 1,800 motorcycles there. The big Spring Classic Indy, May 14th through the 22nd, expecting over 2,000 vehicles there. And then early June, we're going to Tulsa for the very first time. So lots going on. Keep up to speed at Mecum.com for all the schedule updates, and the consignment books are open for all of those pending auctions. So if you're thinking about consigning, do not hesitate.
Turning our attention to the world of car news, Bruce Myers has passed away at the age of 94. He was a military veteran, a surfer, and racer who perhaps is best known for being the creator of the Myers-Manx dune buggy. He really changed the course of car culture when in 1964, he and some buddies put a custom fiberglass body on a Volkswagen chassis, creating what would go on to become the iconic dune buggy. And only several thousand were made before competitors flooded the market with their own design. But what's so fascinating, John, is that here we are decades later, and the ones that collectors seek out are these original Myers-Manx versions. And that really speaks to Bruce's legacy and the impact that he had.
Oh, absolutely, Matt. You know, if you think of vehicles, non-production vehicles from the 1960s, probably the generic dune buggy is what comes to mind. Definitely an icon from that time period. And Bruce was the brainchild behind that. What it is it's based on a VW Bug platform with the body removed, and then the floor pan, the chassis, shortened up to accommodate that really cool dune buggy body. And you're right, man. So many copycats jumped onto the market, and the success, not only copying the styling, but also the dimensions of that. So to look at one at a glance, kind of hard to tell if it's a real authentic Myers-Manx or not. And still in production today, you can actually still buy to this day a Myers-Manx kit to convert to your Volkswagen. And I think that those kits run about $3,000. So my understanding is that company is going to stay in business and is going to be viable into the future. So cool legacy to a really neat California car guy, Bruce Myers.
Yeah, he will be sorely missed. John, let's talk about the continuing conversation, man, oh man, about electric vehicles. It seems just as when you thought the conversation couldn't get any louder, there's more dialogue about it. And something interesting this week, you and I were chatting about what you and I had heard out there, and you caught an interesting phrase that has started being used in the form of automakers now saying the phrase carbon neutral.
Yeah, there's some new buzzwords starting and some definitely pivoting and shifting, Matt. And before we get into that, let's make it crystal clear that right now electric vehicles, have been around for 10 plus years, only represent about 2% of the market. And as we move forward on this, it's going to be interesting to see if more and more consumers, the actual buyers, get on board. Right now, they seem to be resisting this, but carbon neutral is a very vague, fairly early term we're hearing now that some of the manufacturers are starting to use in a scheme to continue to produce gasoline-powered vehicles, but yet offset carbon footprint on other parts of their business, whether it be manufacturing or distributing. So we're going to be hearing that in the neutral as a pivot. Another thing that we're hearing is in regard to the autonomous movement, which is become very, very quiet as we're forging ahead towards electric, and that is smart highways. That would be electrical components embedded actually into the highways to be able to provide the necessary amount of information to safely operate cars hands-free autonomously. So we are seeing the bottom line, we're seeing pivoting and we're seeing shifting, and this crawl, and I will call it a crawl to this electric movement, is going to be a very slow process. And I think it's going to start in the urban areas, and it's also maybe going to start with the consumers in bigger quantity, maybe as a second vehicle. So I think that the long-term future of what are referred to as the ICE engines is definitely still very, very strong.
Well, and something else strong is demand for two-door sports cars and supercars, and there's a new one from Maserati in the form of the MC20. Now, this is the successor to the MC12, which was a car we last saw in 2005. This new iteration features a twin-turbo V6. Here are the specs: 621 horsepower, 538 pound-feet of torque. Top speed is rated at 202 miles per hour. It's built in Italy, has those exotic butterfly doors, loads of carbon fiber. Right now, just a coupe has been shown, but the brand says the platform does support a convertible as well as a full electric version. Pricing is going to be right around $210,000. It looks great, but I got to wonder, with it being such a crowded marketplace, is there room for another two-door sports car?
Well, we're going to find out, Matt, and I think that the Maserati name certainly is going to draw in a lot of potential buyers. The car really has got a very exotic look, as you'd expect, but it goes even way beyond that. You mentioned some carbon fiber. In fact, the entire tub is a carbon fiber monocoque, and that's something that folks at Stellantis have actually got some experience with, because the outgoing Alfa Romeo 4C has that same build strategy. And what that does is it keeps this vehicle very light and it keeps it very strong. And maybe one of the most interesting factors is most of us that are IndyCar fans, like myself, recognize the name Dallara as the supplier of the Indy cars for the race series, is actually been very heavily involved in the engineering and the actual building of this platform as well. So yeah, it's expensive, north of $200,000, but a very exotic car that I am going to predict is going to be pretty reasonably priced to operate. So it's going to be fun to see exactly how that comes out to compete against vehicles like the Acura NSX and maybe even the Corvette C8. But if you want that panache of that Italian name, Maserati, and you want a sports car, it's been a long time since they've had a two-seater like this one.
Well, and it's been a long time also since they've had a proper halo vehicle to really get substantial interest in the brand and also to drive traffic into their showrooms. And I think this MC20 could be just the ticket. Now, John, another entry into the world of two-door sports cars is coming from Porsche in the form of a new 911 GT3. What do we know about that car?
Yeah, and this is really cool, Matt, because what's happening in this era of a lot of the supercars, high-performance cars going to the mid-engine platform, you really got to hand it to Porsche. Since the mid-1960s, the 911 series has been rear-engine, and it looks like there's no end in sight for that. Lots of buzz over what we think is going to be a 2022 enthusiast version of that iconic Porsche 911, the GT3, normally aspirated 4-liter flat six, putting out around 500 horsepower at a stratospheric 8,250 RPM. That thing's a real screamer. And they have also said that the excellent PDK 8-speed dual clutch automatic transmission for weight purposes is going to be downgraded to a 7-speed. Kind of an interesting note there. Again, the theme of keeping as light as possible. available, but enthusiasts just going crazy over the fact that a conventional 3-pedal 6-speed manual transmission will be available on it as well. About $150,000 will be the base price, but I'm going to guess that they'll be going out the door in the $200,000 range with a few of the key options, putting it priced right in line with that Maserati sports car we just talked about.
Mecum Auctions is proud to bring you On the Move with Matt Avery and John Craman. For more on the world of collector cars, head over to mecum.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Joining me now is Scott Talon, Director for Jeep North America. Incoming this spring is the quickest, most powerful Wrangler ever in the form of the 2021 Wrangler Rubicon 392, featuring a 6.4-liter Hemi V8 that delivers 470 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. Scott, it's got to be such an exciting time for Jeep with such a product coming to the market very soon. Take us back during the development. When did it become apparent to you and the team that there was need and demand for this type of vehicle?
You know, Matt, that's a great question. In fact, this is something we've looked at for really a number of years, and you know, our fans, our followers have been asking. In fact, the aftermarket has been doing this, as you may already know, for quite a while now. So. It's been in development for a while, and even last summer we created one of our concept vehicles. It was a Rubicon 392 concept for Moab. Unfortunately, we didn't make it to Moab last year, but we did have the concept and we released it. And you know, when we put it, the reaction in social media was loud, and it was very clear. They wanted us to build it. They wanted a production V8 Wrangler. It's been since 1981 since we had a V8 in the Wrangler. So we knew it was time. The vehicle had been well under development, and the irony is that we've had them really running around in plain sight now for over a year and a half under testing and development, just essentially hiding in plain sight. So when we announced the concept, we were well under the development process and had the plans to bring it to market this year. So we were just excited to kind of tease it out a little bit and then finally announce the production version just a few weeks ago.
Now, the last time that I saw this vehicle was last fall at a media preview in the Chicago suburbs. And at that point, it was still a prototype. It was a concept, but you allowed journalists to get up close and experience the vehicle. We couldn't drive it, but it certainly looked complete. So I'm wondering what steps were needed to get it production ready.
Yeah, you know, not a lot of changes from the concept. Again, we really wanted to tease, you know, what the production vehicle really could be and what it would look like to gauge the response. So, you know, at the time, the concept, we had it rated at 450 horsepower, 450 pound-feet of torque. In fact, the production version is a little bit better than that. Actually, output's going to be rated at 470 pound-feet of torque and 470 horsepower. The performance is absolutely amazing, the on-road performance. You know, to think about a Wrangler, top down, doors off, you know, it can hit 60 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds flat is nothing short of an exhilarating experience. But, you know, a lot of engineering work went on behind the scenes. You know, not only did we have to recalibrate the suspension for the additional weight up front, but the frame rails have been reinforced for the additional torque and rigidity that's needed with the extra stress that will go on the vehicle. So a lot of engineering work went underneath the skin. But the performance of the vehicle and the concept to the production vehicle, there's a lot of commonality there. The car was close to production ready, the concept was.
Now, as you alluded to, the vehicle boasts some impressive specs, both on and off-road. So let's start with on pavement. From a performance standpoint, what can it do?
Yeah, you know, as I mentioned, you know, 470 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque, and you know, fully dressed, it can hit 60 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds to a standing quarter mile in 13 seconds, which is, you know, absolutely amazing. That's equipped with, you know, all the hardware that you would expect a Rubicon to come with, including the all-terrain 33-inch tires. So, you know, fully dressed, you know, just phenomenal on-road performance, taking that fun-to-drive factor that I think Wrangler is truly one of those hallmarks to a whole nother level.
And a lot of that fun happens out off-road. That's where these vehicles are, or most at home, it seems. Scott, what's the capability of the Rubicon 392 out on the trail?
Yeah, that's where obviously this vehicle truly shines. I mean, when the pavement ends and the trail begins, the 392 is chock full of all the hardware needed to really traverse and take that capability to a whole new level. So, like all Rubicons, of course, you've got a 2-speed transfer case with low range, but front and rear lockers, sway bar disconnect for additional articulation. Dana 44 axles, 33-inch tires that I mentioned. The 392 also has an additional 2-inch lift over your standard Wrangler, so additional crown clearance, and you're putting all that power not only through the 2-speed T case, but a 373 rear end. So you've got tons and tons of torque at low RPMs that make that off-road experience just that much more effortless. So needless to say, it's an absolute animal. It has all the hardware that you'd come to expect on a Rubicon, plus that much more. Standard steel bumpers, for example, on the 392. So taking that capability to a whole new level.
You mentioned earlier that in addition to the engine, there's other exclusive features like that reinforced frame. So I'm just curious, are there any other specific touches unique to the Rubicon 392?
Well, I mean, again, a lot of the suspension has been reworked. The overall geometry, the ride height is different, and then we also have a dedicated set of Fox high performance monotube shocks that are also unique to the 392 model. So the calibration for both on road and off road is 100% unique. All the calibration that was done specifically for the 392. So all those little bits and pieces just make the vehicle perform better on and off road. But yeah, those are the highlights I would tell you that are differentiated from the standard car.
Now, is production still on track for these vehicles to be arriving in showrooms later this spring?
Yeah, later this spring. So just in time for the warm weather to break and hit the trails. So yeah, we're really excited. We're not talking a year from now, but just really a matter of weeks, if not months, that 392s will be showing up across the country.
And at this point, any projections on total volume of sales, or is there any plans to cap it and have it be some sort of a special or limited edition, or are you guys going to build as many as customers want?
Well, really, we're not going to don't get too much into the production figures, but certainly based on the early demand that we've seen, a significant amount of interest, a lot of buzz, and a lot of conversation, a lot of early hand raisers and demand that we've already received. So we're excited to bring it to market. I'm sure we're going to have a hard time meeting demand initially, but we'll do the best we can to do just that.
Something you mentioned earlier was how you and the team really work hard to stay on top of what's happening in the marketplace and to understand what a Wrangler customer is looking for. And I imagine that has got to be a very difficult job just because the Wrangler community is so active. There's a very vibrant aftermarket scene as well. So I'm just wondering, how in the world do you keep your finger on the pulse and kind of understand better what your customers are looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question because we've often said that while our customers are the ones that are really the ones that make Jeep, not us at the brand. And there's a number of examples, I think even recently that I can think of that, for a number of years, our owner base, they asked for a diesel in the Wrangler. So, the diesel powertrain is now available in the Wrangler. The return of the Jeep pickup truck, the Gladiator, check. We brought that back up about 18 months ago. The Wagoneer will make a return also in 2021 back in the marketplace and, really establishing itself as that iconic premium large SUV, and a V8 Wrangler. That's another, one of those common requests that we've had. And a lot of this comes through just direct feedback that we get through our social media. Jeep has the largest social media following of any automotive brand in the world. And it's a very vocal group and a lot of great conversations, but more importantly, a lot of great insights can be extracted out about what those customers are doing to their vehicles because they can't get it from the factory, or they have to go after market, or they're making modifications to their vehicles. So that's really the primary source, is just listening to our customers and paying attention and meeting those needs. And each year we go out to Moab and really meet with really what is the core of the brand, just the hardcore enthusiasts that are really modifying and putting their rigs to the limits. And again, another test bed to where we go and engage, the reaction of some of these concepts that we bring out to determine what is really viable from a production and a market standpoint. And so that is really the key driver. It's, we all have a lot of great ideas, but they're really tested in the marketplace well before we actually launch them.
There's been a lot of conversation in the last couple of years about whether or not we're living in the glory days of muscle cars, just because from a performance standpoint, what is readily accessible in showrooms is truly mind-boggling, where cars having upwards of 500, 600, and 700 horsepower can easily be found. But it also seems that there's a growing momentum to up the performance capability of off-road vehicles. And as it stands now, the current dyno pickup truck king of the hill is Ram's TRX with 702 horsepower. Now there's a Jeep Wrangler that will have 470 horsepower. So Scott, from your perspective, are we living in a glory age of off-road performance?
Yeah, and I see it even advancing even further from here. Today we're at this moment, at least we're talking about the 392 Wrangler, but when I think of capability, in terms of capability, the most advanced and capable Wrangler will be the Wrangler plug-in hybrid that comes out also later this spring. Another, again, a very advanced powertrain that's, something I think a little bit unconventional when you think in terms of what a Wrangler is in the marketplace. But the way we've been able to apply the electrification to Wrangler, it enhances both the on-road piece of it, the fun-to-drive factor. The efficiency is vastly improved, but it's also way more capable than a standard gas Wrangler, just given the level of torque that can be applied at essentially off-idle RPM. So being able to leverage this technology to improve the capability, I think, is clearly where this space is headed, and I expect that Jeep will continue to be a leader, too.
Well, like you said, it's been a busy season. I can only imagine it's going to get busier with the arrival of the Rubicon 392, the 4xe, and then also another vehicle showing up very soon is the Cherokee L. What can you tell me about how that vehicle came about?
Yeah, the next generation Grand Cherokee will be in market also later this year. Very excited to bring the next generation Grand Cherokee, and truly all new. And when you look at it, I mean, first of all, we see the vehicle. It's an absolutely stunning from the outside. It's an all new design, all new sheet metal. And this is the first time that we'll offer the Grand Cherokee in a 3-row configuration. So all new sheet metal on the outside, beautiful design, distinctly Jeep. But at the same time, it's different from everything in the marketplace, and it makes a big step forward. I would tell you that the next generation Grand Cherokee L it's really more of everything, and it's not just adding an additional third row, but it's more about standard safety and technology in the vehicle too. More comfort and convenience features that are all standard in the vehicle. So this is the next generation Grand Cherokee, which is truly a flagship of the brand. Been in market now almost 3 decades. Have a tremendously loyal following, and now we're going to be able to expand the lineup with a 3-row offering, and then later this year, at the very end of the year, we'll bring the 2-row Grand Cherokee all new generation into the marketplace as well. So we really think by bringing the Grand Cherokee, a nameplate that's known and renowned, most awarded SUV ever, and expanding it to accommodate the third row and bring in a larger audience and a more family friendly vehicle, is going to really attract a whole new customer base to the Jeep brand.
And then another hotly anticipated arrival will be that of the Wagoneer. Scott, any developments or updates that you can share?
Yeah, the Wagoneer is something that really excited about. We announced the concept a few months ago, and ever since then, tremendous amount of interest and inquiries, and very soon we'll be launching and revealing the production version of the all-new Wagoneer, Grand Wagoneer, which, to your point, yes, will be in market later this year, third quarter. I'm really excited because this is the return of what we believe is true American premium large SUVs. That's what the Wagoneer represented when it was last in market. I think most people do to the 80s and the wood paneling, but that truly at the time was a revolutionary, truly a luxury vehicle with full leather interior, AM/FM cassette, standard air conditioning. But this new Wagoneer takes today's technology and connectivity and really just improves and enhances the driving experience like nothing else that's currently in the market.
Scott, final question for you today is related to the merger between FCA and the PSA Group being complete, and now the Stellantis organization is up and running. Does any of that have any direct impact on Jeep's operations, or from here on out, is it just business as usual?
I would tell you at the moment, business as usual, but certainly excited about the opportunities that the new company offers, and I think that it just bolsters the future for the Jeep brand as a whole too. So just opens up more opportunities.
Well, thanks, Scott, for your insight into the wide world of Jeep and the exciting season that you guys have going on. And I certainly look forward to doing it again real soon.
Sounds good, Matt. Thanks for the time today.
Don't adjust that dial. On the Move, we'll be right back. Our program is proudly presented by Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auctions. Now back to Matt and John.
We were talking at the top of the show, John, about another arrival of performance cars that are using smaller displacement engines. And really, that's nothing new. We're seeing that in all segments of the industry. But what's so fascinating is how the brands, Dodge, Chrysler, Ram, and Jeep, remain committed to delivering V8 power to the tune of anywhere from 400 to over 800 horsepower, all by way of the legendary Hemi engine, a power plant that's been around for decades and loved the world over. So today, we're doing our homage to the Hemi.
Absolutely, Matt. You know, the third generation Hemi began, over 15 years ago and is going strong. In fact, never better. So in this era of change and evolution, let's talk about what's available today, what's available in the 2021 model year for high performance V8s with that great exhaust rumble, and not be speculating, worrying too much about what might happen 10 or 15 years from now. And let's kick it off, of course, with the folks at Dodge, and specifically 3 different body styles, the Challenger, Charger, and Durango, all available with a variety of V8 engines. Now, keep in mind, standard engine, Pentastar 3.6 liter V6 has been an excellent power plant, very reliable and reviewed. All the reviewers just really love that engine. But let me just give you an idea of what's available in today's world. You've basically got 3 different powertrain options for the folks at Dodge. The entry-level Hemi is a 5.7 liter, and that's available in all 3 of the Dodge product lines. There's a great normally aspirated 6.4 liter V8 called the 392. You and I had a chance to do a little bit of a review in a Dodge Challenger with that engine. We both loved it. And then, of course, the Hellcat power plant, the 6.2 liter supercharged Hemi engine, available for the very first time this year in the Durango, and sales are white hot. What do you think of this lineup from Dodge with all of these Hemi V8 powertrain choices?
Well, they wouldn't be doing it if customers didn't want it, and it seems clear that drivers are still seeking that kind of V8 experience. 8 cylinders thumping under the hood, the roar of the exhaust, and that kind of power readily accessible by your right foot. That's just a difficult experience to replicate with those smaller engines. Now, while Dodge has got a lot of the attention recently because they've done so well with these engines in their cars, I think it's easy to overlook that these engines are available in Chrysler products.
Right. And of course, Chrysler right now with the 300 and the Pacifica minivan, no V8 available in the Pacifica minivan, but the luxury car from Chrysler, the 300 sedan, which still, even old platform, still is relevant today, standard V6 power, but also optional with the 5.7 liter Hemi V8. And once again, no end in sight for that. A lot of folks have asked about, gee, what do you think the future of the big Chrysler sedan is? Well, it's still selling surprisingly well. And at a base price of under $40,000, it's pretty darn good value in a high-styled car. Check that option box for the 5.7 liter Hemi, and I think you've got a car that's going to be around for quite a long time yet.
Now, shifting over to Ram, there's been a lot of attention, and rightfully so, given to the brand because of the TRX, which has been fitted with that supercharged 6.2 liter, but Hemi has a long-standing connection to Ram trucks.
Well, once again, Matt, and there's a prestige factor here. The Ram 1500 has been extremely popular, and I really think that one of the reasons is the optional powertrain that's available. The 5.7 liter Hemi, also available in a variety of the Ram 1500 models, and they're smart. They proudly put that displacement and that Hemi nameplate on the exterior to shout out to the world, yeah, it's got a Hemi. You don't have to step all the way up to that top of the line TRX that we've talked about so much here on the podcast. We're huge fans of that truck. We did have a chance to actually see the truck late last year in person, and very impressed not only with the power characteristics, but also of the appearance of it, the size of it, and the technology that went into it, particularly on the suspension. So, and once again, no end in sight that we can see or any glimmers out there that Ram's going to be changing their powertrain strategy. So plenty of long life left for optional V8 engines in that great truck line.
Well, and like you said, John, no end in sight, and that certainly extends to another brand in the portfolio, which is Jeep, which is just starting a run of what the conversation I had with Scott earlier about this new Wrangler Rubicon 392, the first time it's been installed in that. And again, it's the most powerful, quickest Wrangler ever. And John, that is a major indicator to me when you have a vehicle like Wrangler that is known the world over for off-road performance, and now Jeep is seeing value in giving it high-level street performance too. I mean, that's a major indicator of their commitment to that V8 power.
I could not have said it better myself, Matt. You hit it right on the head. Of everything that we've talked about, I think the fact that Jeep, for the very first time, has put a V8 in a Wrangler, and they didn't decide to go entry-level 5.7. They went all the way with that big husky 6.4 liter engine, calling it the 392. And obviously the amount of engineering that went into the truck and all the time and the effort, this was not an inexpensive engineering job for the guys at Jeep to integrate that engine. And they would not have done it if they would have felt like, you know what, we just don't have that much life left in these large displacement, either V6 or V8 engines. Another indicator that, at least for the short to medium term, V8s are alive and well. And I just got to say, very, very excited to get behind the wheel of one of those V8 powered Wranglers. That is going to be a lot of fun.
You've been listening to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. For more information, visit Mecum.com. And join us again next time as we take you inside the world of muscle and collector cars and more.